You are now listening to My Life with Bipolar, Busting the Myths and Changing Perceptions, Amber's Story Part 2. And notice you mentioned about having bipolar type 2. So is there kind of like
hmm
a spectrum then? Is there lots of different types of
Yeah.
bipolar? Or is it just like 1 and 2? Well, yeah, talk to me.
So,
Talk to me about that because I find that so interesting as well that there is, different types.
there's actually, I think there's three types.
Mm.
Um, there's three types. So there's type one, which is a bit more extreme. It's episodes of mania and depressive episodes as well, but I think it's more mania than depressive. But the mania is different from the mania that I experience. So it takes you like out of reality, and it can often end up you getting hospitalized. People with type 1 can also experience psychosis. um but yeah, I have type 2, so I experience episodes of depression and hypomania. So they are like episodes that last for at least 4 days. And there's also another type that's called cyclothymia, which is basically like episodes that happen in a cycle. So it will be like every week or every few months or something like that. It will work like a clock. They will just have
Mm-hmm.
hypomania and depression and basically swing backwards and forwards. So yeah, but the main symptoms of hypomania and mania, they're just sort of like problems with concentration, problems at work, problems at school, relationship difficulties, being abnormally upbeat, jumpy, or just wired, increased activity, energy, agitation, a sense of well-being or self-confidence. So with mania, some people might think that they are the next Jesus, or they might believe that they've discovered a new religion or something along those lines. There's a decreased need for sleep, more talkativeness, racing thoughts, distractibility, poor decision making, spending, which I didn't realize was a symptom. And then I looked back and was like, yeah, that makes sense. Um, Taking risky sexual moves and making foolish investments as well is another um, symptom. But yeah, I've always been quite impulsive with my spending, and I remember actually there was one period. It's kind of impressive. The most money I spent in the shortest amount of time was about £400 in 20 minutes. I
Amazing.
literally got a bunch of and was just like buy, 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 buy. And I remember
Yeah.
I went back to my flat, and my flatmate, there was a bunch of parcels. I'd been away for a bit. She was like, "Are you okay? Like, there's this many parcels for you," which was crazy. But yeah, um, the along with obviously the mania and hypomania, there's obviously major depressive episodes. So you'll have like periods of being depressed, sad, empty, hopeless. You might experience significant weight loss or weight gain. You might have insomnia, or you might sleep way too much. Slow behavior, feeling worthless, excessive guilt, thinking or planning attempting suicide, and self harm.
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult. I'd say the main difference between mental health problems and mental illness is just the extreme. It really is an extreme spectrum. Some people might not have things as extreme. It is definitely a scale. Like I say, I don't experience severe mania. Mine's a bit more in the middle. I wouldn't say it's really low, but it's definitely somewhere in the middle. And I experience quite severe depressive episodes. So yeah, it is quite extreme, and it is quite turbulent living with bipolar. And yeah, it's a bit hard sometimes. It takes a lot of management. hell of a lot of management, and I've done a lot of learning on what helps me and the way that I live and things that can help me manage it best I can.
Mhm. No, it does. It absolutely sounds exhausting, like having to kind of manage that day in, day out. When you first went to the GP and you kind of were open about how you were feeling, did that take a lot of courage to go and do that? And do you feel like, yeah, they dealt with you in a good way so that you felt like you could go again? Because I think it's really hard, like, to go and talk to a GP about mental health and
Mm.
just be like, hello, I'm going to talk to you about what's going on inside my head. Did you find that quite a nerve-wracking process? Did you do anything like, yeah, do you have any advice to others that are trying to make that first step? Because I think a lot of people can be quite nervous at GPs anyway.
Mm.
So talking about your mental health always feels terrifying. So yeah, what kind of gave you that courage to just go and do it and get that support?
I think if your life is being massively impacted, whether that's being anxious to go outside or do certain things, things that you enjoyed, like I think you have to constantly look and think, could my life quality be a bit better? And I think if it is the case, you should seek help. It is terrifying, and I always end up just being overly emotional and not being able to explain myself. But I think it's important, especially, you know, if medication can help you, then, well, not just medication, there's also therapy. But for me, I found medication that being the first thing that helped me, at least get to a level headspace to be able to tackle therapy. And it's not like the end of the world saying I need a little bit of help. And I think people sometimes just feel like they can go at it alone, but sometimes I think you just have to hold your hands up and say, I need help. And it is terrifying, but that is what they're there for. I think I the thing that I struggled with the most was actually presenting at hospital. I've presented at A&E a few times, and I thought that if I presented at A&E, I would basically get sectioned. I thought I was going to
Yeah.
get sectioned every time I've been to hospital, but actually, that's the last thing they're going to do. They only section you if they really have to for your safety. Quite frankly, it's easier for them to treat you outpatient, um, and it's easier for recovery in that way as well. But yeah, I used to be really terrified to present to hospital and GPs, but I think I've come to a realization that mental health, it should be seen the same as being unwell generally. And you would go to hospital if you had a broken leg. It's the same thing. So I think definitely those stigmas around mental health and breaking that down definitely helps.
No, absolutely. And before you got the diagnosis, did it feel confusing? Like, what is going through? Like, why do I feel this way? Yeah. Do you remember how you felt before? I know getting that diagnosis, was a really good thing for you and it kind of made you
Mhm.
realize this is why I feel this way. But yeah, before that, was it quite confusing? Like, why am I going through this? Why am I okay? And now I'm not okay. Yeah. Do you
Mm.
remember what was going through your head before you got your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I mean, I had had so many years of just complete ups and downs and periods of confusion. So when I read the symptoms of bipolar, I was like, oh my God, this is the answer to everything. It actually was quite refreshing to have that presented. And honestly, it made me think this means that I can get the care that I actually need to get
Mm,
better and to feel more supported and have access to better medication, and professionals that can actually help me. Obviously, it took a while for me to get there, but
yeah.
now I can say, thank God for my, diagnosis. It's helped so much.
No, absolutely. And I think we spoke about this before we started recording. And as I said, I'm assuming that everyone's journey with how we go through the process of getting a diagnosis is different, but
Mm.
what sort of things did you have to go through? I think you said that was it a psychologist that you had to sit with and they did some sort of assessment and stuff. Is that kind of a set thing that people that might have bipolar have to go through, or is there, yeah, different things to get that diagnosis? And how long does it actually take for them to give you that result that, yeah, we are going to give you a diagnosis of bipolar?
So it was obviously a bit different with me because I had that really bad reaction to the medication,
Yeah.
which was a indication that I actually had bipolar. Because I mean, bipolar it is a lot of just chemicals in your brain just being out of whack. So if you are given a medication that is meant to help depression, it might not actually help you because the chemicals in your brain are not the same as someone else who doesn't have bipolar. So I guess that would be a massive indication if you have bad side effects to a medication that is supposed to help your mental health, then that is a massive indication that you might actually have a mood disorder. Um, but also, I think it's quite hard as someone with bipolar to acknowledge that you go through periods of being elated and being proactive.
Mm,
So for me, I only noticed the depressive episodes, but I think if anyone was to listen to this podcast and they were to see someone in their life that experienced symptoms similar to that, the ones that I have explained, of not being depressed all the time and also having these like bursts of energy and bursts of just being a little bit not themselves, then it's definitely something to bear in mind and to maybe mention to someone because honestly, I don't know how I would have even acknowledged that I had bipolar unless I had that really severe reaction. Um, I was just very, very grateful that there was a mental health specific GP at the GP surgery that I was at who knew about it. I think along with many mental health problems, it's very difficult for practitioners to actually give you the right support because it is all inside your brain. Unless you're good at communicating exactly what you're going through, it's very difficult. But the process of getting diagnosed was actually relatively easy. Um, you have to be seen by a psychiatrist. So I was diagnosed in one session. I had the assessment, he gave me my diagnosis. But it was actually really interesting because after my first very serious crisis, when I was still in London, I was seen by another psychiatrist. And she saw me maybe for 10 minutes and she suddenly was like, I don't think you've got bipolar. I think you've just got anxiety. And I thought to this woman, what the heck is she on about? Of course I have bipolar.
yeah.
I lit bookcase. I have every single symptom. Um, but it was quite irritating because she put this discrepancy on my notes. Later on, every time I got seen by a professional, they said, oh, there's actually a question mark about your bipolar. And I thought, oh, this bloody woman, why did she? So eventually, actually, after my last crisis, I actually got diagnosed again. I saw an amazing psychiatrist. Actually, I've seen many psychiatrists. Some are great, some are not. You just have to have your intuition and whether or not you connect with them and whether they exactly get what you're saying. But this psychiatrist was amazing. He listened to me and then he said, I categorically can say that you definitely have bipolar. So it was kind of like a second confirmation that I had bipolar, even though I knew I had bipolar. But
Yeah.
yeah, there are some people that might not understand you. I think if you have a gut feeling that something is going on, stick with your gut because it might even be that that psychiatrist might not even give you the right diagnosis. There's also a lot of confusion now I'm realizing going through this process of potentially being neurodivergent. I won't get a diagnosis for several years. The waiting list is extremely long, but it was something I pondered about for the last year. There's a bit of confusion between bipolar, autism, ADHD. They all present quite similarly. So it's good to do your research, but it's also good to get like a second opinion and to make sure that you have the correct diagnosis because there are a lot of people who have autism who've actually been diagnosed with bipolar who don't have bipolar. So It's a bit of a confusing thing to go through, but for me, the best thing that I've done is to basically become an expert in bipolar. It helped me manage my condition by being really knowledgeable on what I had actually gone through, and I've used this last year to really hone my knowledge and to just become an expert on what it is that I deal with day to day.
hmm No, I love that. And with employers, is this something that you're comfortable in disclosing? Do you tell them, I have bipolar, or are you someone that, yeah, doesn't mention it to employers? Because I'm interested if there is a judgment around that as well. If you feel like managers are like, oh, don't want to hire her for that reason, or you just feel like you've had a bit of stigma in the workplace as well. So yeah, is it something that you do tell your employer that you're going through, or do you prefer not to mention it?
So it's interesting because bipolar is actually a recognised disability. So I see myself as disabled because when I go through an episode very, very bad, I don't work full time. I only work part. Um, I've taken a lot of time out of 9 to 5 life. It's quite difficult actually being bipolar and working 9 to 5, and quite often there are lots of people with bipolar who don't actually work or only work part-time because quite frankly stress is one of the biggest triggers for bipolar episodes, and work is very stressful. um so for me, just I've basically changed career paths and I do what I enjoy now. And I work more to just keep my schedule interesting. I don't work full time at all. I just have too many mental health problems on a regular basis that it's just really difficult for me to work. And that's something that I've dealt with, and I felt really sort of like people would judge me for not working full time. And it's something that I go through all the time. People say, "Oh, what do you do?" And then you have to go through this awkward conversation of being like, "Well, I don't actually work full time." Um, so, but when I was going through the diagnosis process in Manchester, I was at work and I was having to take lots of sick leave, and I had to be open, and it was really difficult because when I was going through that really difficult phase of being on the wrong medication and having that really serious side effect, my work was really severely impacted, and they actually tried to fire me. It was really difficult. I wanted to stay and I wanted to fight my corner, but I also really just needed some time out of life for a bit. Um, so I guess it's up to the person whether or not they it depends how in control you are of your bipolar. So for me, I'm still in the early years. Right? It's been 3 years, but it feels like it's been like 2 weeks. There's I'm still learning like all the time. And for me, I think I would definitely disclose it because it's just easier and you can get a lot more things changed and more awareness set in place for you when you do actually start working. But it is a difficult one, obviously. There is stigma around it. And as long as you're open with your employer, I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the way that you're describing it, it does sound like it's quite isolating to go through. It feels like a lot of people don't really understand like what you're going through. Do you have any advice to maybe like a friend that their friend has got bipolar? As someone that has it, what would you say to that friend, that best help that person? As I said, I know everyone is completely different in what works for them, but do you have any advice, as someone that's going through it, what would you say to people? This is how I want to be treated. Like I know you said some tips earlier as well, what experiences you've had with friends, and you don't want them to say certain things to you and stuff. But yeah, just interested if you have any more advice around that to people that don't know how to support, because I think people can either go two kind of extreme ways when someone struggles with mental health. It can be they know what to do, or they don't exactly get it, but they know how to support you, or they
Mm.
just are like, oh. that's too concerning for me. I don't know what to do. So the easiest thing to do is just not to address it and mention it, which I'm sure you probably
Mm.
experienced both. But yeah, just interested in what best works for you.
I think the best thing to do is to just be really patient with whoever it is that's going through things. If they disclose to you that they have bipolar, I think it's really important to just keep an open mind. Don't instantly stigmatize. Don't think that they're crazy. They're not going to hurt you. They're more likely to hurt themselves than they are to hurt you. Just be kind and compassionate as you would be to anyone else, anyone who was going through cancer treatment or anyone who had diabetes. It's literally the exact same thing. Obviously, sort of. It can be really scary to have bipolar. It can be life ending if the right support is not given to that person. And I think people dismiss it because a lot of people have an understanding of mental health and mental health conditions, and they think they understand it, but in reality you won't understand it unless you've gone through it. And I think a lot of people think that you are in control of your behavior or you're in control of the way that you react, but it's not the case. The part of your brain that controls the fight or flight sensation is called the amygdala. Basically, there's something wrong with the amygdala. People like me, it makes things that aren't threats feel like threats. So quite often you might behave strangely, in comparison to neurotypical people. But it's not something that you can actually control. So some people might be like, well, why are you acting like that? You're acting so weird, but actually, like, they can't help it. So definitely just being kind and compassionate and caring. That's all you need to be. I don't think you need to go out of your way to be there for someone unless they've asked you to. Um, and just treat them normally and maybe have a little bit of more awareness of their behavior and maybe choose not to judge it. Maybe choose to step back and think, is this how they would normally behave? Maybe not. Maybe they are going through a hard time. And if they do disclose to you that they are having a hard time, don't run away. Don't, you know, react really abrasively. Just be there like how you would when they are normal. That's what I would suggest anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know we spoke about it a little bit earlier when I think there's so much more to bipolar than people think there is. It's not just about having these mood swings. Do you get any other kind of like common questions that people ask you about it or any like misconceptions? I know I didn't prep you for that question, but just interested if there's anything else to do with bipolar that you're like, this is what people think it is, but it's absolutely not that. Or yeah, any certain questions that people have said to you and you're like, why am I being asked that? But obviously, if you can't think of anything, then don't worry. But I'm always just interested if there is, because I feel like people just come out with the wildest things when people do have mental health, and they're just you're just like,
Mm.
why have you asked them that? Why have you said that? Um, but yeah,
I think
is
the
there anything else?
I think the biggest thing that annoys me is when people say that the weather's being bipolar. So, like, they think it and they just kind of connotate it to that, where it's just happy, sad, rainy, sunny, But, as I've described, like, it isn't just being happy. I'd be happy to just be happy, but mania is not just being happy. It's lots of different behaviors, being impulsive, being grandiose in thinking, um, lots of things, shifts in energy, and the same with depression. You just don't have the energy or the motivation to get through life. Um, it's really difficult, and it's not just happy and sad. Um, it would be really simple if it was just happy and sad. I would just go and get an ice cream if I was sad. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think of any weird things that people have asked me. I don't know. I think most people get kind of set back when you say that you have bipolar. I think they almost don't know. say. So it's almost like people don't ask me anything because they're like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, I mean, I try really hard in life and online to be super duper open and to talk about it um more because I think, when you see me, you think I look quote unquote normal. I don't look crazy. I'm just your average girl. I just happen to have bipolar. And I think that's really important because, like you don't have to look like really crazy to be mentally unwell. You can look very normal and function about your day actually quite normally and have a mental illness, go home and have a breakdown, like there's such things as masking. You could mask throughout your day and then go home and just not be able to cope and spend your whole weekend inside because you've spent so much energy forcing a facade. Um, yeah, I think that's why I try my hardest to talk about it, especially as a young person. It takes a really long time to actually get diagnosed with bipolar. You have to have like more than one episode. It takes a bit of reflection on life to realize these things sometimes. So it does take a long time. It takes about an average of 10 years to get diagnosed. So
Which is mad.
yeah.
Yeah.
The more I can shout about it, the hopefully easier and faster people can get diagnosed and yeah, and then eventually save more lives.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And before we move on to like the well-being side of it and how skateboarding has really helped you, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about to do with kind of a diagnosis and anything else leading up to it? Or yeah, do you want to go into the well-being stuff? It's completely up to you. I just want to make sure you've covered what you wanted to say.
I'm pretty sure yeah, I've pretty much covered everything, I think. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're on track. Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, with the skateboarding side of stuff then, was this a hobby that just kind of came out of nowhere? Like, yeah, tell me about how this has happened and yeah, the benefits it has when you do have bipolar.
So it's kind of like an interesting story because my bipolar was what actually started me skateboarding. So obviously I've said that you can be quite impulsive when you have bipolar. You can buy things randomly. I'll just have an idea and it will pop in my head and then I'll just suddenly buy it. I've made lots of weird purchases that I'm like, why did I like super duper impulsive. Um, so for a while on Instagram, I had followed. I'm sure most of you know who Sky Brown is. She's a young girl from I want to say Japan, but she's also half English, and she is on the Great British team, and she will be competing in the Olympics in Paris, and she was in the Olympics in Tokyo as well. She's really young and she's really really talented. I just happened to follow her on Instagram. Not that I wanted to skateboard or anything like that. I just thought she was a really cool girl. And I followed her and Instagram latched onto that. It started showing me lots more videos about skateboarding. It I just constantly was getting skateboarding videos. I guess I was pausing on it for too long and it started showing that. And I basically took it as a sign. I was like, that's it. I'm gonna buy a skateboard. And I bought a skateboard really impulsively, having literally, I am not sporty, I am not athletic, I do literally nothing. I have no balance, I walk into walls. So I was like, there's no way I'm gonna buy a skateboard. So initially I bought a longboard. I learned how to like balance and push and carve, and I got kind of bored after a month. And um, to be honest as well, this was in the period where I was in the middle of getting my diagnosis as well. I quit my job in around the May time and I didn't have to move back to London until June. So I had a solid month and a half just free. So I just went out and I skateboarded and it was a massive distraction and it was fantastic. It was kind of what I needed at the time, to just channel my energy into something and just forget about what I was going through and de-stress really. Um, but I realized that I actually wanted to be around people. So I picked up a normal skateboard and I learned how to skate in a skate park. And it's basically I've not stopped since. I Love it. It's the best thing I've ever picked up. It acts as a form of meditation. Like when I'm skateboarding, all I'm thinking about is that trick or just me, myself, and I forget about everything. And when I was in London and I was severely under medicated, I was manic as hell. I had so much energy. So I'd go out and I'd skateboard for 6 hours a day, which is absolutely obscene. I do not have that kind of energy normally, but it was just really helpful. It meant that I wasn't out doing stupid things. I could just exercise my energy out, and it kind of worked as a bonus sometimes, if I was too scared to do something, I'd do it on a manic day and I would achieve it, I wouldn't have any fear in me. I would just go for it. Um, it's kind of weird because I'm actually obviously, like I say, a super duper anxious person. And I invented this little bit of an alter ego. So she'd come out sometimes when I was manic, sometimes when I was just feeling it, and she was called Send It Hams. She used to come out and make me feel brave, and she was like my alter ego. And if I was feeling scared, my friend would go, "Oh, where's Send It Hams today? Is she here?" I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I need to be a bit brave and put my brave pants on." But being her and pretending to be her was what basically made me realize that eventually I did actually become her, and I became brave, and I believed in myself, and I overcame challenges skateboarding, and I could overcome challenges in my normal life as well because I was doing all of this stuff on a skateboard, and it gave me bravery and it made me confident, and in turn it helped my mental health as well.
I love that. I literally love that. And I think it's so important for anyone that's, going through exactly what you're going through. But for young people, I think that's really inspiring. Like that this has really helped you having, just an alter ego in your head. And now you've become that person and you're doing so many incredible things to advocate for what people with bipolar are going through and to educate others. And I think that leads nicely on to like the media volunteer stuff that you're doing, which is incredible. What was the charity you're doing that for again? Was it Bipolar UK?
So, yeah, I'm a Bipolar UK media volunteer. So I basically volunteer whenever they need any help with like interviews or things for social media. And yeah, I basically just try and spread awareness. And they're a really, really great charity, and they do a lot for people with bipolar. And yeah, they just needed more people who were around the like late 20s, mid 20s sort of age demographic because there isn't many people in the media who are my age that talk about bipolar. The only people that people often think of is Stephen Fry, and that's literally it. So
Yeah, I love that. And did you ever think that you could do something like that if you reflect on like, I don't know, like 10 years ago, for example, could you imagine that you'd be doing something like that and talking so openly about what you're going through and advocating for others?
I think obviously I wasn't very confident and I wasn't very good at talking. And in turn, like talking more openly has helped me accept things and also to spread awareness to friends and family. I mean, my parents were so scared about me talking openly online about bipolar. I remember they used to say, but make sure that you don't tell anybody. And I thought, well, why? Why would I not talk about it? It's a part of me. Um, but also, I think that talking openly helps my friends and family understand me more. And it also helps, it could help strangers understand people with mental illness as well. Um, so, yeah, I don't really see why I wouldn't talk about it. This is probably the first time I've gone in depth about, my whole journey and the experiences that I've had. But I think it's really important because it highlights the struggles that I've gone through. And it's really important for people to get the confidence to advocate for themselves and to realize when they actually deserve better treatment and better quality and care.
Exactly. And it's all about breaking down those stigmas. And there is sadly so many stigmas attached to mental health, which is still very prevalent, and it's really sad that people have these outlooks on people like yourself that have that lived experience and going through it. Um, so yeah, episodes like this and what you're doing is incredible, because there might be someone that listens to this today that feels so alone, like you did, feels quite isolated, not really knowing where do you reach out for information, what, how do you go through the process and stuff. So yeah, I think it's incredible what you're doing, Amber, and definitely keep it up, because I think what we spoke about earlier, like have a podcast and talk to other people about it, because I think it is so important. And just by talking to you today, so much that I have learned that I honestly wouldn't have even realised that someone like yourself goes through. So I think it is all so important. And do you have any advice? I know that you have been let down by services, but thankfully now that you're in a better place and you've got a better team around you. But for people that are going through that, where they just are like, I don't know where to turn to, like it's really difficult.
Mm.
Do you have any advice to people that are just like, yeah, what do I do? I don't feel like I'm getting that support. I don't feel like I've got the right psychologist or counselor or whoever they're dealing with,
Mm.
doctors and stuff. Do you have any advice around that?
I think obviously there's lots of problems with the mental health system, and it is sometimes potluck where you live. Sometimes you could have a really good experience or you could have a really bad experience. And unfortunately, if you can afford private, you will get a better experience. I've actually never gone private and I now have a really good experience with mental health services. So there are good people out there. It's just sometimes being patient and like making sure that you do get through to those right people. There's always mental health hotlines available. There's numerous numbers you can ring. There's Samaritans, there's the crisis line you can ring. If you are in immediate danger, you must always present to A&E, whether you feel your life is at risk or things are really going downhill. Always present to A&E, because
Mm.
that can give you the care from a team that can help you immediately. You could get sectioned. You could voluntarily go into a mental health unit. Um, and I think it's really scary to think about, but sometimes if you need the help, you need the help. And there is no like there you don't need to worry, because those people are there to help you. And yeah, I mean, if things aren't that serious, just try and talk to your friends and family and try and be open, because the minute that you have an open conversation and you talk, it breaks things down. I think I went to a suicide prevention course a few months ago, and even if you have suicidal thoughts, the minute you mention the word suicide, then you are immediately less likely to actually take action on those thoughts. You have to say the word suicide though. You can't say things like, "Oh, I've been having bad thoughts."
Yeah.
But the minute you say the word suicide and you open up to someone, you're way less likely to actually action those thoughts.
That is so interesting. This is why I could speak to you for ages about all of this. It's fascinating, and I can understand that it is really difficult at the same time talking about it and what you're going through. But I just think it's so important that we do talk about it
Mm,
to break down the stigmas and yeah, just educate people. I mean, they
yeah.
were all the questions I had for you. Was there anything else with your story that you wanted people to know? Anything you feel like we've missed?
I think we've covered everything. I don't think I've missed anything. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Incredible. Well, Amber, you have been a delight. I've literally loved talking to you. It's honestly been so educational, and I just think you're doing an amazing job. And you spoke about that so well. I know you've said that it's always been quite difficult for you to talk about. Honestly, you've spoken about that so well. And again, this is the thing with mental health, isn't it? Like you can talk about that so well, but I know that you're struggling, and it's just mad, isn't it? Because I wouldn't get that impression from talking to you now. Like you've spoken about that incredibly. And that is the thing with mental health. It is so easy to not notice that people are going through it. So thank you so much for that. Honestly, it's been amazing and so educational. And I think to anyone listening that is struggling, it will definitely help someone. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm glad that my story could be told, and that if it does help anyone, then that will be really great. And if not, if it spreads more awareness, that's even better.